Okay, welcome to uh, American Politics, Politics and the Media, where this is chapter 10. And this week we're going to be lecturing on how media and politics coincide and how much media affects politics and vice versa. So, when we talk about America and in our media, we're going to first look at it as America at odds. We have both a digital world, but we also have a print world. So you have a clash of cultures when it comes to young people and our more mature people in our society. And the first question I'm going to ask you guys today is it possible to verify the truthfulness of statements by online bloggers? If so, how? So a lot of us get our information from bloggers. Usually, me personally, I have a bit of an issue with bloggers. So, like, I'll tell students that I don't accept opinions of bloggers. I don't. I will if the assignment, if the article is in the New York Times in a source that we deem as credible. Okay. Now, can a employee who's a famous reporter have a blog? Of course they can. But I make it a practice for myself not to do that. And just so you know, these two questions will be part of your What Do You Think this week. So it'll be a two-part question. And it says, if all media disappeared, would that inconvenience you? Why or why not? So this will be What Do You Think this week? It's going to ask you a two-part question, one about the bloggers and how truthful they are. But also, we're going to look at how important print media is, because I know some of you in this course like to actually have a physical paper or a book to read as opposed to going to our uh, digital devices to help us. So when we talk about this, when we're looking at media, we're looking at media from different aspects. We're looking at it from a mass media, which is basically communications channels through which people can communicate to large audiences. One that is like television. Television is a way for people to communicate to large audiences. The internet is also another way, but we're going to get down to the internet in a minute. Not everybody has access, right? So that would go under electronic media. But internet is a good way for people to get connected. Print media, communication channels that consist of printed materials such as newspapers and magazines. And then we have electronic media, communication channels that involve electronic transmissions. Again, internet. So when we talk about the role of media in our democracy, we're talking about this from different aspects. So when we're talking about these different aspects, we're looking at it from these media characteristics, such as in our new world, we're starting to see a decline in old media. A lot of people don't have like cable anymore, right? And so with the decline of cable and with the rise of internet, people don't really do a lot of cable. People get things like Netflix and Hulu, so you really don't need to go to a television to get your information anymore. And so when we look back at the last century, film and radio did not like displace the printed media. It's when television came along, right? So when television came along and everybody started watching TV, because when it comes to film, you have to go to a movie theater. Not everybody wants to go to a movie theater, right? No, I not me, I don't. But when we go to but people, if you have a TV in your house, you'll come home from work, you'll plop down in front of TV and watch whatever that you watch, right? And so when information is giving over that platform, everybody's getting that platform. We can talk about Walter Cronkite. At one point, Walter Cronkite, who was a newsman, was the most trusted voice in America. I don't think we have anybody in this day and age that's the most trusted voice in America. When we talk about youth in the new media, millions of, especially young people, get their information from like social media, right? So may it be Facebook or Instagram, or as the young people say, Insta. What else? Snapchat. I mean, Twitter, which is Donald Trump's favorite form of communication. So, but and the question is, when we're looking at these different ways, especially when we talk about this new media versus old voters, can older people use this new form of information? They can. I mean, they really can. I'm sure a lot of you guys have grandma on Facebook, right? But for a lot of older people, because when older people, and I almost said we, haha, no, older people tend to get their information. They're kind of set in their ways. This is how I've always got my information. I got it from Walter Cronkite. But guess what? Walter Cronkite died, right? And and with that, that old way of getting information has also died. So, but can older people not get their information this new way? No, they can get their information this way. It's going to take a little work, but it can be done, right? Of course it can. When we're talking about also new media, when you look at somebody like Rush Limbaugh, which I'm sure a lot of you guys don't know who he is, most of his audience tends to be composed of middle-aged white men, and the things that Rush Limbaugh might say to younger people might be irrelevant. So they don't get their information from there, but they get their information from people like the Trevor Noahs and Stephen Colbert, right? And last week tonight, gentleman with the British guy with the glasses, I can't remember his name right now, but that's where a lot of people get their media. That's where they get a lot of their information from, especially young people. Young people like to be entertained. Young people like to laugh. So Samantha Bee on TBS and her late night show might be a way for you to get the news. And it's okay. Bill Maher might be another way for young people to get their information. A kind of curmudgeon old white guy who makes jokes and he's funny and he talks about politics and he's very current with it. And so therefore, and I'm laughing while he's saying things, right? People don't get their information from the stuffed shirt newsman anymore, where they they change their voice and say, and that's the way it is type of talking, but they make jokes and they laugh and they make you laugh in the process. But at the same time, while you're laughing, you're getting that information, which is good, right? So when we talk about roles of media in democracy, one of the things that tends to happen is the agenda setting function of the media. It tends to be a lot of criticism when we talk about media's ability to determine which issues are considered important by the public and politicians. And when we're looking, and I'm going to speak very frankly right now when we're talking about a lot of these candidates. If you look at how it's being framed right now, currently the Democratic primary has many people of color. You have a black woman who's half black, half Asian. You have a black man. You have a Hispanic man. You have a Asian man. But when we look at the polls, right, besides the black woman, pretty much the other minority candidates of color tend to get lost somewhere. And the media will say, well, it's because of the polls. No, it's not just because of the polls. It's also what the media, which is really controlled by white males, tend to determine which issues are considered important by the public and by politicians. A lot of times, when we talk about these Democratic candidates, we'll talk about Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden's like 77, Bernie Sanders is almost 80, Elizabeth Warren is 70. And sometimes they'll talk about the mayor from Pete Buttigieg. And yes, he is LGBTQ, but he's also a white man. So you see the media tends to, when we were looking at what the agenda is, the agenda will be set, and the agenda will cater to a certain segment of the population. So then other people tend to feel like they're left out, and this is where you'll get stations that like BET or Univision, where people can go and see people like them and have issues spoken about that concerns them and their communities. When we talk about things like priming and framing, when we talk about priming, media outlet promotes specific factors or ideas that might affect the public's thinking and related topics, right? So this tends to have some influence over how how we see things, how we perceive things. A good example is I had a student at a school that I work at. He said, "I don't watch Fox News," and I said, "Okay, that's." But when I read his what do you thinks and everything, it seemed to be very Fox News orientated. And again, I don't care which news he watches. When we were having a discussion in class, I knew that he gets his information from a conservative station, which was Fox News, because he said a couple of terms that I heard from Fox News, because I watch Fox, but I also watch MSNBC. I watch CNN. I also watch PBS, and I get my information from Al Jazeera English, and I will go get my information from the BBC, and I will get my information from Reuters and the AP. So I get my information from many different sources. I think it's important because what it does for me, because this is my job, right? This is my job. So what I do is I'm getting this information. So when I'm dealing with you, I know where you get your information from. Well, anyway, this student said he did. I don't watch Fox News. So I said, Fox is playing in your house. He said, "Well, how do you know?" I said, "I know because he said, "Well, my dad watches it." And I said, "Okay. So you don't watch Fox News, but when you're in the comfort of your home, it's playing in another room. And if it's loud enough and you're just, let's say, eating dinner in the kitchen and Fox News is on, you don't think that's having an effect on how you're seeing things out, how you're seeing issues and situations. Of course it does, right? And so he kind of got quiet, said nothing else. And I wasn't doing this to embarrass him. I was just trying to make a point. You get your information from a certain outlet. He tried to push back and say that's not true because he wanted to argue with me, which is fine. I'm all for debates. My class is very debate topic, especially when you're in person. It's very debate heavy. We debate, we have discussions. It's important to have those things. And so once I proved my point that because it's on in the house, it's affecting his belief system, right? And then it also establishes the context of the media report. So now, if you watch in it last week, if you watched the videos I uploaded last week, you will see what I'm talking about. It could be the same issue, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN, and you'll get different outcomes about the same topic, right? And it's very interesting and fascinating how this works out, and how it affects our ability to understand. Okay, when we're talking about framing, also it frames how the story in the world works. For example, considering a different stories that can be told about someone who is experiencing poverty, a TV news show might cover a man whose condition was, to all appearances, due primarily to bad luck. Perhaps he suffered from a life-threatening disease or could not work, had lost a job, and then became homeless. The description would set up a particular frame, encouraging viewers to take positive attitude toward the social spending that could provide aid to such an individual. Now, let's say the story portrays the man as just being lazy. Maybe he's just lazy. He doesn't want to work. So if we're getting that from the media outlet, he's lazy, he doesn't want to work. Guess what? You're less inclined to want to help him, and you're less inclined to make demands of your government. So based on how the media is filtering that information to you, that's how you'll take. That's how you interpret it, and that's how it affects your belief system on that issue. For like helping the home. The medium, and because of this, the medium will affect the message, right? And so it also, when we're talking about affecting the medium affecting the message, it affects the nature of the television coverage. Television coverage of important issues are too brief and superficial. So, and think about it, when we're talking about children in cages, it'll tug on our heartstrings. It's important for a couple weeks that it's running on our 24-hour news network on a loop. But at some point, we become disinterested. Or because the media is not showing it like they were showing in the beginning, we tend to think, oh, it's been resolved. Oh, is that still going on when somebody mentions it? Yes, it's still going on. Yes, it is. And this is done because of time constraints. Right. So and everybody wants to break the story. A good example is Michael Jackson passing away. When Michael Jackson died, TMZ is the one that broke that story. And ever since then, and I remember TMZ breaking the story. I remember CNN and all the other news networks were holding off from confirming because they didn't have the information. Well, TMZ broke the story about 4 hours later. Other news started confirming what TMZ already knew earlier that day. So now everybody's rushing to break the art story, be the first to break that story. And so in a 24-hour news loop, you know, it'll be on for that 24 hours, but you got to go to the next day for the next story, right? A good example right now is Al Baghdadi has died. Donald Trump comes out, and it was almost like when Barack Obama walked out and gave a summary of how Osama bin Laden was was killed, murdered, depends on how you look at it. Either way, they died. Then Donald Trump did the same thing to report to the Americans what happened, right? Well, guess what? Because there's an impeachment process going on, that went on for Sunday, but Monday morning, Nancy Pelosi pulls up the beginnings of articles of impeachment of Donald Trump. Guess what? The article about the ISIS leader being murdered, being shot, being killed, being murdered is now on the bottom of the pile because now everybody's talking about the impeachment of Donald Trump. And because of these time constraints, which is imposed by the networks, political issues are presented because time is limited. Not how they're presented is due to the limitations, and how important. So we'll overlook a whole lot of things, right? If we, only when things get to the extreme do the media pick them up. Like the media knew about the Flint water crisis. They knew about it. They didn't say nothing until the new mayor took the oath of office and she held a press conference because she didn't want that to be left on her doorstep as a new mayor. And she reported to the American people where the state EPA had let down the people, the governor's office had let down the people, and the federal EPA let down the people in the state of Michigan, in Flint, because the federal government had not did their due diligence on their oversight of the state and the fact that the state, in order to save $100 a day, again, let me say that again, in order to save $100 a day, decided to poison little kids in Flint, Michigan, with lead in the water, and not just little children, the community as a whole, to where people had to start taking baths with bottled water, and celebrities like Cher and Will Smith's kids would send truckloads of water to Flint so the people would have access to clean water and drinking and bathing water. When we're talking about candidates and television, one of the things that tend to happen more times than not are personal attack ads. And when we talk about personal attack ads, we're talking about negative political advertisements that attacks the character of an opposing candidate. A good example right now is we only hear one thing, right? We only hear part of a story. So when we hear part of a story, oh, this candidate prosecuted black men, right? But it's so funny because and the candidate is a black woman, so of course that issue gets so much more exaggerated. But let's go further. Then when we're talking about when we're talking about the other candidate who also is a prosecutor like the black female candidate, we never talk about her. In fact, I highly doubt any of you know who she is because the media has never talked about Amy Klobuchar being a prosecutor and how many black men did she prosecute and put in prison. But the issue is, let's go a step further. Let's talk about Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden was all for the crime bill. Heck, he was the author of it. Right? And so when we talk about these things about certain candidates, we'll portray one candidate as horrible on this issue, but we negate all the other candidates that also did the same thing. Instead of looking at things like, look, this person was a prosecutor, they were doing their job. They literally were doing their job. They weren't picking cases, they were taking the cases that were brought to them by law enforcement, and that's what law enforcement does. They don't go out and look. They don't go out and arrest people. They're not the ones. They're not the ones who are building cases. They're the ones getting the information, and then they build the case, and they base it on what the police department tells them. So when we're talking about political advertisement, they're called issue ads. They focus on an issue. The Affordable Care Act. The reason why the Democrats we took Congress last year was Donald Trump was trying to destroy and take people's now federally mandated by law health care away. And all you got to do is give people something for 2 years, give it to them for a year, and try to take it away and see how the American people react. Right? And so the Democrats use negative advertisement to create sympathy for the candidate being attacked rather than support for the attacker. And so what they did was, you know, Katie Porter down in Irvine or AOC in out of Brooklyn or wherever they're from, or Lucia McBath, who was Jordan Davis's mom, won in Georgia for her House seat. And what we'll do is instead of what you do is you build sympathy for the candidate and rather than support for the attacker by portraying the issue in that candidate as being somebody who's fighting for the people, for you. One thing about negative ads, they better inform the voters about the important campaign issues than the positive ads do. Because we as Americans, we like negativity. We do. That's why all these reality shows where the real housewife of this city and married to this and that and I'm a doctor over here and we will watch it and because we like train wrecks, we like negativity. We do. And a lot of people say, "Oh no, I don't watch that stuff." But how are these shows still on? Because we like negative things. We like those judge shows where there's paternity test and you're not the father, or you like you like these talk shows where people are fighting each other because my husband is sleeping with my sister. People tend to gravitate towards the negative. And if we can find a candidate more about the negatives of that candidate and instead of the positives, we will go with the negative. Which leads to this whole thing with cognitive dissonance, which is why you're reading the Mistakes Were Made book, because that's what that's about. How when I support somebody, I will justify their behavior. When I don't support somebody, I will use a negative. I'll believe the negative attack ad that such and such is campaign just put out. And so I'm gonna wrap it up here because this is about almost 25 minutes, and I know that's your all you can take. So I'm gonna just end with this because I think it's important.
That's all, folks.